One of the most common complaints about the Novation Launchpad Pro MK3 in beatbox loop station competitions is that it's unfair on people who can't afford it. Beatbox/vocal looping is already a relatively inaccessible hobby because of the costs. I mean, a loop station is about $500. A mic, headphones, cables, speakers can set you back several $100s. Not to mention that in other countries, hefty import taxes and conversion rates make it even worse. What if I told you I have a solution for those people who want to start taking their looping to the next level, but can't necessarily afford a launchpad? Not only is what I'm about to describe significantly cheaper than a launchpad if you have the main prerequisite equipment, which I can guarantee many of you do, but it's actually way more powerful than a launchpad too, offering both insanely useful features and a super rapid workflow that makes the launchpad pale in comparison. On top of this, since it's a MIDI controller, it should, keyword here being should, it's still organizer dependent, be totally legal in all beatbox looping competitions that allow a launchpad. Besides, after the community sees how accessible this is, I'm sure a lot of competitions will allow it. Anyway, that's enough preamble. This is JMix Music, and may I present to you the most powerful second device that you may have at home. So what is this mysterious device? I won't keep you on the edge of your seat. This device is the humble iPhone, or an iPad, or specifically any Apple device that can run Loopy Pro. You may have heard about Loopy Pro through artists such as Inkie or Frosty, who use it as an extremely powerful standalone looping device. However, today, we're just going to be using Loopy Pro as a launchpad substitute, with some features that actually make it more powerful than the launchpad, and significantly cheaper if you already happen to own an iPad or an iPhone. Editor's note: as of when this video has been released, Michael, the absolute Chad solo developer for Loopy Pro, announced that Loopy Pro is coming to Mac soon. Everything I describe in this video, from setup to technique, should work exactly the same, regardless of which Apple device you're using, whether it's an iPhone, an iPad, a Mac, or a MacBook. So what is Loopy Pro? Loopy Pro is a loop station, sampler, sequencer, and DAW, with a key focus on customizability. You can arrange your projects however you want, putting loops, one-shots, and buttons anywhere, and also having the ability to control any parameter you want with knobs, faders, and pads, which can also be infinitely customized. This controllability isn't just limited to the internal stuff. Loopy can also control external devices with MIDI. Now, if you don't know what MIDI is, see my previous video. I explain how it works in general, as well as in a loop station competition context, which is what we're focusing on today. So if you remember from that video, we're going to be doing the two main functions of the launchpad, but using Loopy instead. Those being sending MIDI Notes to control OSCBot, to have essentially a more powerful OSCBot, and using MIDI CC to control assigns. Before we get on to actually using the software, we need a way to connect your Apple device to your launchpad. You'll either need a USB-B to USB-C cable, or what I'd recommend, a USB hub, and the loop station's included USB-B to USB-A cable. Most USB hubs have power delivery, which lets you charge the device so you'll never run out of battery mid-session. The hub I use is from Ugreen, which I have an affiliate link for in the description if you want to support me. If your Apple device happens to have a Lightning port, find a good quality USB hub with a Lightning end, not USB-C. Now, using this, you can connect your device to your loop station via the RC-505's USB port. Loopy Pro is available on the App Store for a 7-day free trial, and then after that, it costs $30 for a license, which comes with a year's worth of major updates. Now is the perfect time to buy it because they just dropped the 2.0 update, which is super important and I'll get onto later. As far as spending goes, that's all you need for the setup. $30 for Loopy and $20-ish for a nice USB hub. That's literally under a fifth of the price of a launchpad. So if we want to use the sequences or quantization on Loopy Pro, we need to sync up the tempo with the loop station. Think of this as the equivalent of using two MIDI cables to connect the launchpad to the loop station, as I explained in my connecting guide. On the loop station, click Menu, go to the right one, and open USB settings. Change the audio routing to line out, then audio mode to generic, which will prompt you to restart the loop station. Once that's done, go into MIDI settings, go across to the right one, and set clock sync to internal, and sync out to on. This makes your loop station the master device for the MIDI clock, so starting the metronome on the loop station will also start the metronome on Loopy Pro. Next, go to the right one and set USB in through to MIDI out. What this does is it means that any MIDI signals that are sent to the loop station via its USB port are forwarded out through its MIDI out port. You can then plug your loop station's MIDI out into your second device's MIDI port, which allows you to send MIDI messages from Loopy Pro directly to your second device, such as a Line 6 Helix, BOSS SY-1000, etc. Finally, let's go over to the iPad. Ensure it's connected correctly as described earlier, and click the 3 lines button in the top right to open the settings dropdown, and then click synchronization. You should then see RC-505mk2 in the MIDI clock sources section, and make sure the sync start stop is enabled. Now let's close that and click the tempo settings right next to it. It should say external here. You can also enable this button here, which makes the screen flash in time with the tempo. Now let's test to see that it's syncing. Press the start stop button on the loop station until it's solid green, and you should see that not only is Loopy Pro flashing along with the time and tempo, but the BPM and position in the bar is shown in the top right. So now that we've got everything set up, we can start to make our own template. The top left folder icon is where you can save and create new projects. This is the default one with the 10 donuts. Down in the bottom left, we have the edit button, which looks like a pencil. This is where you'll do all the editing of what widgets you want on your screen. Along the bottom, from left to right, we've got audio loops, MIDI loops, audio one-shots, MIDI one-shots, buttons, dials, rotary encoders, faders, XY pads, grids, stepped dials, text, and notes. You can add them by pressing their respective button and then dragging and dropping them to wherever you'd like, and they snap to the grid. You can resize and reshape them too by dragging the corners. It's very intuitive. If you run out of space on your screen, or you just find stuff getting a little bit cramped, you can press these buttons to add or delete rows, which you can add more widgets to. You can also add more pages to your project with the plus button on the right hand side of the screen, which you can jump between mid-set instantly by pressing the buttons here. This is especially helpful on iPhones, as to not make your buttons too tiny to actually press. Finally, you can drag over several widgets to highlight them, allowing you to quickly copy, delete, or move the section as a whole. Now you know how to reorganize, add, and move around your widgets. Let's make them actually do stuff. The workflow of editing a widget's function is super simple. First, you tap it in edit mode, and then you select the control, the action, and finally its effects. So for example, let's say I want this button to toggle this slider between 0 and 100 by pressing it. We click the button in edit mode, add an action as press, and then select trigger widget. Set the target to this slider, set the adjustment to toggle value, and then set the on and off values to 0 and 100% respectively. And voila! If we exit edit mode by pressing the pencil in the bottom left, we can see that our button now toggles the fader between 0 and 100%. So just to recap, you add an action to the control, then you select the target and then its parameters. It's super easy when you're entering it yourself. You just follow along the self-explanatory options. As you've probably guessed by now, we're not just going to be controlling widgets on the screen of the iOS device, we're going to be controlling the loop station. When we're adding an action to a widget, you can either use the search bar to find send MIDI message, or just scroll to the bottom to find it there. Now we can set the target to RC-505mk2, which lets this signal be sent out through the USB cable to the loop station. If you watch my other guide on what the Launchpad actually does, you'll know that we can use MIDI CC to make our own powerful assigns, and use MIDI Notes to control OSC-FOC-M to have a much more customizable OSC bot. Out of the widgets, I suggest using the following for MIDI CC: buttons, dials, rotary encoders, faders, XY pads, button grids, and rotary dials. Most of the time, a simple button will suffice, as they can be super powerful when used to their maximum potential. Firstly, and this is the case with all widgets, you can add text to them to remind you what they do, and also change the button's color, as well as the text size and position. Unlike the Launchpad Pro MK3, a single trigger can be mapped to as many actions as you want, and as you've seen earlier, can have different actions depending on how you interact with it. You could make pressing on it with 2 fingers do something completely different to, say, swiping down on it, or just pressing it once. Once you've got your desired action down in this menu, if you press and hold it, you can then duplicate it, or copy and paste it, which makes doing the infinite effects changes technique super easy. You can make just one CC message and then dupe it 4 times, only changing the CC values to what you want each time, instead of manually having to go through the process of adding an action each time. If you didn't understand that last sentence, go watch my infinite effects changes video, it's all explained there. The other most powerful thing you can do to your buttons is to quantize them, i.e. make their effects happen on time with the MIDI clock. If you press the circle next to the first action, you can either set it to quantize to the beat, or have a delay after you've pressed the button to actually send the message. By clicking the circles of the actions that follow the first one, you can set them to happen after last, with last, or with next trigger. The next trigger is just the next time you do that action again, i.e. for this button when you press it again. After last makes the second action wait until the first is finished, whereas with last starts them both at the same time, but delay and quantization can really switch things up. This allows you to put a time or beat delay before the signal is sent, which can allow you to effectively sequence MIDI CC sends. You could, when combining this with the infinite effects changes technique, have it change effects automatically when you're doing a build-up, or make an absolutely crazy hands-free drop. And at this point, my lawyer has advised me to ask you to like the video if you're enjoying it so far. Now that you know how buttons work in detail, the other widgets are quite self-explanatory. Sliders and dials are basically the same and work exactly how you'd think. A notable function is that when using a trigger widget to action on them, you can give it a ramp at the bottom here, which basically means it moves from one value to the other slowly over time. This, in combination with quantization and assigns to multiple input or track effects on your loop station, can give you a super cool drop. Rotary encoders are quite goofy. They're basically just dials that can spin infinitely. I don't think they're going to be used by loopers much in this setup. XY pads are like sliders, but you can map each axis to a different parameter. If you've seen Christoph loop, think like the pad on his Korg mod wave. This could be used for build-ups, so controlling two assigns at different rates or making some experimental sound design. It's all up to you. Button grids are essentially just a grid of buttons. They function exactly how you think, except the clip slicer, which allows you to do vocal chops or chop up loops that you have on Loopy. It only works with loops inside Loopy, so we're not going to be doing that today. Step dials allow you to have a unique action at each step, so you could get quite creative with this, or just use them to organize your project a bit. An example of how I use this is that in my normal Loopy Pro projects, I have a different step set to each popular song tempo that I make my songs to, which allows me to switch between them super quickly. Finally, text and tutorial allow you to annotate your project. So if you were sharing this, you'd be able to teach someone who's using your project how to get it to work, or you could just give yourself reminders. So now we've covered MIDI CC, let's move on to MIDI Notes and controlling OSC-VOC. You can use MIDI loops and MIDI one-shots to control OSC-VOC M the way the sequencer does on the Launchpad. It's super simple and way easier on Loopy. Just add one to your project, tap it whilst in edit mode, and then click the pencil icon up here to bring up the piano roll. So you can draw in notes like you would do if you were producing in a DAW like FL Studio. You can even import MIDI sequences you've saved to your files as well into the track with this button up here. But importantly, for all of this to work properly, make sure you go into the Mixer tab, find the color of the MIDI loops that you're using, and set its output to RC-505mk2. MIDI clips function exactly like how your loops do on your loop station. You can start them and stop them by pressing it, and one-shot MIDI clips are exactly like this, but function how one-shot tracks do on your loop station. As mentioned earlier, you can make as many of these loop tracks as you want, put them wherever you want, and organize them however you want, so get creative with it. They'll be quantized to the loop station's MIDI clock too, because of our setup earlier. You can see immediately that this absolutely annihilates the Launchpad's puny 32-step sequencer. Not only in terms of steps, but it's much easier to program, and it's incredibly customizable, which you've probably noticed is the running theme of this video. You can also send MIDI notes via buttons, but given that nobody really uses note mode in vocal looping competitions, I'm kind of going to brush over it. When you've got such a powerful sequencer in the form of MIDI clips, why would you ever use this? If you go into the Mixer tab and click the plus button, you can either add an on-screen musical keyboard or a musical typing mode, which converts keyboard inputs to notes. So if you have a magic keyboard for your iPad like me, you can use it as a makeshift piano. Just make sure to set the output to the loop station in the Mixer tab and it should work perfectly. You can even use an external device like a MIDI keyboard or a Launchpad or that Akai that sits unused in your cupboard. Yes, I know about that. Simply plug it into your USB hub, click the add button in the bottom left, add it as a MIDI device, set the destination to the loop station, and you're good to go. Let's just go back to MIDI loops for a second. They don't just record and play MIDI notes, but they can also record MIDI CC too. Set the target of the widget sending the MIDI CC to the color of the loop you want to record them on, and now you can record MIDI CC messages and play them back. So by now you may have noticed that stock Loopy Pro is a little bit bare when it comes to inbuilt effects, especially compared to other DAWs. When you see someone like Inkie, Christoph or Frosty, they often use a large amount of AUV3 plugins. These are a little bit like VSTs, but instead of finding them on random websites, you download from the Apple App Store. They're absolutely essential when it comes to using Loopy Pro as a standalone, but we don't need any at all for our Launchpad substitute. They work a little bit differently to VST plugins on desktop DAWs and often cost a fair amount of money, and honestly there are way too many to cover in this single video, ranging from instruments to synths to effects. Technically there are MIDI ones too, a good example being MLFO, which is a simple LFO tool, Flux 2, which is a slightly more customizable and complex one, or Atom 2 Piano Roll, which I used to use for MIDI notes before they added MIDI looping in update 2.0. All plugins with a MIDI capability can be used to output to the loop station simply by setting the output to the RC-505. Earlier, when we set up the Loop Station's audio mode to vendor, what we did was essentially turn our Loop Station into a class-compliant audio interface. In layman's terms, Loopy Pro now uses the Loop Station to process audio in and out, which allows us to use the iOS device as an audio recorder. The days of Audacity are over. Simply press the recording button in the top right, select combined inputs, and then perform your round and stop it once you're done. You can even record in lossless audio too. Another way to do this is to screen record the iPad. That way you have the video of all of your actions being used as well as the audio. And honestly, even if you're not using Loopy Pro in the way I've just taught, you could 100% just use it as an audio recorder, as an iPhone is way smaller and more convenient to carry around than 99% of audio recording equipment if you're shooting a wildcard video outside of your home studio. Plus it has that lovely UI and the tempo synced flashing, which can enhance your videos. Finally, I think it's important to talk about the one downside of this setup. So as you've noticed, we're already using the USB port to connect the iOS device to the Loop Station, so we won't be able to plug it into a computer to use with Discord. One workaround I found for this is that you can connect the Loop Station's main output to a second audio interface, which you then connect to your computer via USB. That way you should be able to use this setup in online live competitions. It should work great in absolutely any normal event where you just have to give them a single stereo output pair, but unfortunately for Discord you just need to use this workaround. So by now I think you've got the point. With a little thinking outside the plastic box, we've managed to replicate all of the functions of the Launchpad with an iOS device running Loopy Pro. We've also enhanced them and we can do even more techniques. All that's left to do is get out there and get creating. This video can hopefully open up the world of MIDI devices to new Loop Station users who can't afford a Launchpad, as well as take top-level looping to the next level, opening up an even more powerful MIDI device to competitive loopers. While this video's conclusively covered the basics, the sky really is the limit. Loopy Pro is so customizable, there's countless things you can do with this setup. I'll probably do some more tutorials for more advanced techniques I've come up with as well. I've got some really powerful ones. I'm on a mission to make looping with second devices more accessible, powerful, and fun than ever, but I need your help. Make tracks with this technique and spread it around to share the message. And a shout out's always appreciated in those. In my opinion, the biggest block in the way of Loop Station progress is Swiss Beatbox restricting the Grand Beatbox Battle Loop Station category to just the Loop Station. Come on, there's no excuse for Swiss Beatbox not to unban MIDI devices now. This video's cut down the barrier of entry for MIDI controlling the Loop Station from a $300 Launchpad to being the owner of an iPhone, which over 1.5 billion people are, a $5 cable and a $30 software. And I'm just getting started with this channel. Don't worry everyone without an iOS device. I know at the start you're very disappointed, but I've got something equally good for you. In fact, it's actually more powerful than this, if you can believe it or not, and I'm not joking at all with that. If that sounds interesting to you, drop a sub and like the video so you can return to it later. I'll see you in the next one. If you want to take your support to me to the next level, I have a Ko-fi link in the description where you can donate to me, and I also have my affiliate links down there as well with some of the gear I use. It won't cost you any extra to buy through them, but I get a share of the profits instead of Jeff Bezos, so that's always a good thing. Anyway, thank you for watching. I've been JMix Music, and until next time, adios.